Hello again and welcome back to the channel. This is Michael from TOEFLresources.com. In today's video, it's another practice question for TOEFL Writing Question 2. That's the academic discussion question. Before we get started with the practice, I'll just give you a basic explanation of how this question works. First up, you've got the instructions. Now, the instructions never change except for one little thing, and that is the subject of the class. The subject doesn't really matter, but it will be different each time. Also, the instructions will tell you to write at least 100 words. Remember, that's not a word limit. You are allowed to write 100 words, and probably you should write more than that. Below the instructions is the question itself that you're going to respond to. The question is going to be 3 or 4 sentences, but the most important part comes at the very end. That's the thing you're actually supposed to respond to. In this case, the final sentence is, before we meet, I want you to consider the following question. What do you think is the most effective way to assess whether a website or article can be trusted? Next up, you have the responses from the other students. Now, keep in mind that these responses are going to be shorter than you're actually going to write. On the real test, the other students might write 50 words or 60 words, but you need to write at least 100 words. Keep that in mind. Don't use them as a guide for how much you should be writing. Also, I want to mention that you don't necessarily need to respond to the other students in your answer. You can ignore them. That's one of the most frequent questions I get. Now, that doesn't mean you should totally not even read their responses. I do think you should at least skim them so you don't accidentally just copy their ideas. But don't spend too much time reading them, and don't feel obligated to actually respond to them personally. All right, so here is the question on the screen. What I want you to do now is, in a moment, pause your video, give yourself 10 minutes to write your answer, and then when you're done that, come back, unpause the video, and I'll show you my answer, and we can kind of talk about what I did when I wrote my response. All right, get to it. All right, here's a quick look at my answer. I won't read it all out, but you can pause the video again and check it out if you want. But I'll explain kind of how I approached the task. First up, here's kind of the scaffold that I used. I began with my main point, which is that the best way to determine whether an article is reliable is to check who published it. And then after that, I gave my first supporting reason. It's because if it's trustworthy source, like the New York Times, they've used time and money to ensure that it's accurate. Next up, I have my second supporting reason, which is that if the publisher realizes they've made a mistake, they fix it or retract the article. And then I ended with a counterpoint, which is that some people, like Laura, the other student, might think that the best way is to check the sources the author has cited, but, maybe they're going to make up those sources. That's my approach, and you can do this pretty much every time. A main point, 2 supporting reasons, and a counterpoint. As I said, though, you don't necessarily need the counterpoint. You could delete that totally, and then just expand the 2 supporting reasons. What else did I do in my answer? Well, here's the basic template that I've been teaching to a lot of students these days. I start out with this: while I appreciate the points made by both Caleb and Laura, I think, and then I just mention my main point. This is a good way to sort of pretend that I'm responding to the other students, even if I don't want to. Then I use a phrase like "this is because" to introduce my first supporting reason, and then another phrase like "moreover" to begin the second supporting reason. And then I've also got a template for the counterpoint. I'm going to say something like, some people, like Laura, might argue that, and then I kind of summarize her argument, but they don't realize that, and then I very quickly rebut it. That's it. That's a basic template that you can use or modify in your own answers. A few other things I've done. Well, I've tried to achieve a little bit of grammatical complexity. I've used conjunctions like while and when to create complex sentences. And then I've used another conjunction, but, to create a compound sentence. I've also used an if clause. That's it. In terms of in terms of complexity for the grammar, you don't have to go too crazy. A few conjunctions and maybe a conditional if sentence. That'll give you enough complexity to get a high score. In terms of vocabulary, I've tried to use a few kind of higher advanced words like trustworthy, retract, fabricate, unscrupulous. So you can see, yeah, I've elevated my vocabulary level a little bit to become more advanced and to show the raters my real level. But I'm not going too crazy. I'm not filling up every sentence with these obscure words. I notice now that I've repeated the word publish or publisher quite a few times. If I were to make this video again, I'd probably change that word because I think I used it 3 times. That's something I try to avoid, repeating words too much. Keep that in mind as well. All right, that's all for today. But if you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments down below. I will be happy to answer those. And as always, if you've been writing your own practice answers, paste them down in the comments. And every few days I'll pop in and I'll score all of the responses that have been posted. And I'll try to make a few suggestions about what you could improve when you write your next one. All right, I will leave it at that, but make sure to stay tuned and keep an eye on the channel. I should have some more videos up in the next few days or weeks. Take care till then. Goodbye.